In this lesson, we're going to learn about OpenAI API keys. An API key is a secret credential that allows your C# or .NET application to authenticate with the OpenAI API. When your application sends a request, it includes the API key. OpenAI checks the key to make sure the request is authorized. If everything is valid, OpenAI processes the request and sends the AI response back to your application. So you can think of the API key as a secret key that securely connects your application to the OpenAI API. And remember, your API key should always be kept private and secure. Why do we need an API key? When our C# or .NET application sends a request to the OpenAI API, it also sends the API key. OpenAI then checks this key at a validation checkpoint. If the API key is valid, the request is authorized and OpenAI can process it. But if the key is invalid, the request will be rejected. So the API key helps OpenAI verify that our application is authorized to use the API. In simple terms, valid key, process the request. Invalid key, reject the request. OpenAI allows us to organize our API work using projects. Inside an OpenAI organization, we can create different projects for different applications. For example, we might have a study app, a support bot, and a test app. Each project can have its own API key. This helps us keep credentials, access, and API usage organized separately for each application. So the basic structure is organization, projects, and API keys. Using separate projects and keys makes our applications easier to manage, monitor, and secure. Now let's see how to create a new secret API key. First, make sure you select the correct project for your application. Next, open the API Keys section. Then, select Create New Secret Key. Give your key a meaningful name, such as C# Learning App. After that, configure the permissions for the key. Depending on your needs, you can choose All, Restricted, or Read Only. Finally, confirm the settings and create the key. Once the key is created, make sure you copy it and store it securely. We'll look at how to protect our API key in the next step. Your OpenAI API key is a secret. You should treat it just like a password. Never place your real API key directly inside your source code. And never upload it to GitHub or another public repository. You should also avoid exposing your key in screenshots, videos, public documents, or chat messages. If someone gets access to your API key, they may be able to use your OpenAI API account and generate unwanted usage and costs. So remember this simple rule. Keep your API key private, secure, and outside your source code. Never hardcode your API key directly inside your C# source code. If you do this, the secret becomes part of your application files. And if you upload your project to GitHub, your API key could accidentally become public. Instead, keep the API key outside your source code. For example, you can store it securely using an environment variable such as OpenAI_API_key. Your C# or .NET application can then read the key when it runs. This keeps your secret separate from your code and makes your application much safer. So remember, never hardcode your API key. Store it securely, outside your source code. For local development, we should keep our API key outside the normal source code. One option is to use an environment variable. For OpenAI, we can store the key using the name OpenAI_API_key. Our C# or .NET application can then read this value when it runs. Another useful option is .NET user secrets. For example, we can store our key using a configuration name such as OpenAI:API key. Both approaches help prevent the secret from being stored directly inside our project files. This is especially useful when developing an ASP.NET Core application. The important idea is simple. Keep your API key outside your source code and load it securely when your application needs it. Now, let's see how the API key is used to authenticate an OpenAI request. When our C# application sends a request, it includes several important parts. We have the OpenAI endpoint, the JSON body, and the authorization header. Inside the authorization header, we send our API key using bearer authentication. It looks like this. Authorization bearer. Your _OpenAI_API_key. OpenAI uses this key to verify that our application is authorized to access the API. If the key is valid, OpenAI processes the request and sends the response back to our application. So the flow is simple. C# application, authenticated request, OpenAI API, and finally, the response.